Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of catchy choruses with the band Katatonia? Am I reading that right? Maybe it's just because I don't have a lot of experience with Katatonia, but to me, they exist in two camps. Their earlier stuff is doom metal, their later stuff is doom rock, if you will, just gloomier rock style stuff. I know them mostly for slower atmospheric works, which I suppose can have catchy melodies to them, but it's not always what I think of when I think of those styles of music. But let's see what they have in store for me on the Night is the New Day album, specifically the track Forsaker. And this is a lot heavier than I would have expected from Katatonia. This is from 2009. I really hope we get some Tesseract style harmonies on these on a second or third time through the chorus. Oh, that nice little run there. I love the way that the two guitar lines bounce off of each other. It makes something that feels like it's constantly moving forward, but each individual line has breaks to it. Very well written. Yeah, fun little hi-hat thing there on the drums. Variation and expansion. Yeah. So we started off with an expansion of the vocal melody on the guitar, and then continue to write something new from there. Very cool way to kick this off. There we go. A little bit of that higher harmony I was hoping for. Not exactly what I would have done, but definitely filled in a bit of that range that I feel is it's lacking. That chorus needs some higher pitched stuff in there. Very texture-based guitar line here. Oh! And then silence. Interesting. So the structure, we kick it off with a verse, chorus, post chorus. We do that again, verse, chorus, post chorus. However, there's a guitar solo that comes after our verse. It acts as a transition into the chorus again. So there is a little bit of variation there. It's not a full verse, chorus, post chorus, but the guitar solo is an expansion on the verse. The foundational stuff, the atmospheric stuff, all of that's the same as we had in the verse, and the guitar even kicks off its melody line with what the vocals had started theirs with, although, as I mentioned, it's a slight expansion on the idea, utilizing many of the same notes but filling in some of the space. So technically, I suppose we could call that an expansion of the verse. Call it a verse, chorus, pre-chorus, verse, verse, chorus, pre-chorus, or sorry, post chorus, and then we hit a bridge and we come back out of that and only explore the post chorus. That's interesting. The structure is very different while still retaining that core idea of the ABABCB structure. They found a small variation on it. There's a theme that we might explore one day. It's just going to be really tough to find examples because I don't know that this sort of thing sticks out to a lot of people. But it's taking the standard verse chorus bridge chorus structure and expanding on it just a little bit, retaining many of the similar loops within it, but just doing some things a little bit different. Very different from going into what prog rock would do and have mostly linear, just like A B C D E F G, just running through all the letters for your song and rarely repeating something. And this is a track that would fit really well into that theme, mildly expanding on, the cookie cutter structure. And I really like that. It presents some familiarity while also exploring new ideas. And it gives the song a unique identity to it, at least just from a structural perspective. That solo kind of comes out of nowhere, but it also fits right in with what's going on. And the fact that it pulls from the vocal melody is such a great way to introduce it. It has the ties to where we were. It's such a natural expansion of that idea. Is this a catchy chorus? Like I've said at least once this week, catchy choruses are subjective. Everybody has their own idea of what makes something catchy. I think this has some to it. I like the way that the vocals dance around the highly rhythmic elements, especially with the really quick beginning, the digga digga don't. We get those eighth notes back to kick it off, and then there's a lot of spaciousness, and then some singular, isolated, accented beats. Maybe just one, maybe two quarter notes, but we don't really get any of that speed until we get back to the beginning of the phrase again. And so we have this little bit of burst of speed. We get the lyrics, they come in, they hold out these notes, we have these accented hits, and then the vocals fill in the space again. It's sort of this call and response between the accented hits from the band and the held out notes and when they start with the vocals. And I think that syncopation does create a really nice catchiness to it. A little bit of an earworm there. We also have the drastic departure from the verse in two ways. One, it feels like the chorus hits a bit of a halftime. If you're really listening to that crash cymbal on the side, ka, 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 it's really driving the song forward with these quarter note hits. But aside from that, everything else feels very laid back. We have sparse notes from the band. We have these long held out notes from the vocals. It feels like we've hit halftime, even though there's this one sound that's like, actually, listen, we're driving, we're moving forward. This thing keeps going. But this is also heavier with the distortion on the guitars and, of course, that crash cymbal rather than closed hi-hat sounds, thorny metallic thing coming from the drum kit that we would see in the verse. And so the verse is quieter, it's more ambient, and then the chorus is very heavy. So it comes in tons of impact, tons of contrast from where we were, and there is that really nice call and response from the band to the vocals and how they fill in space and trade off spotlight. So I do think that there's a lot in here that could be catchy. And I think the vocals, the thing is that to me, personally, catchiness tends to be, I'm not saying it exclusively is, but catchiness for me tends to be syncopated. And this is not really that. It's really long, drawn out lines, but I don't think that that's necessarily a detractor. There's probably a few choruses I can think of where the lead melody is long, drawn out notes. Nothing really comes to mind. It's not what stands out to me, but that doesn't mean that something like that hasn't been stuck in my head before. And I think maybe a couple more listens of this could definitely put that into my mind, make it an earworm. But again, like I said, it's all subjective. I totally appreciate that some people listen to this album and this is the hook that gets stuck with them. The album's over, they go do some chores or some errands or go to work or whatever, and this is the chorus that's stuck in their head that makes them want to come back to the album. I can see that. There's definitely some parts to it that I think work at being an earworm. And I think part of it is also just the general simplicity, which we talked about yesterday, I think it was. The main melody and even the rhythmic aspects being as sparse as they are, how little movement there is in a lot of it, it's very easy to remember. Now, something that does work against it is the fact that we only hear it twice. That doesn't necessarily make it not catchy, but it does make it more difficult to become an earworm because you don't hear it as often as you could. Some of the catchiest pop songs put the chorus in 4 to 5 times, and I guarantee you, even if you hate the chorus, you will remember it by the end of that because they're designed for maximum catchiness and they cram it into your ear so many times in such a short amount of space. It's what makes the ending, I think, of not using the chorus and returning to the post-chorus specifically an inspired take for me. But it also, I think, comes from intention. They didn't intend to make a catchy chorus. It just happened to end up that way, that somebody really liked it and suggested it, and a lot of other people voted for it to show up on the channel during Catchy Choruses Week. But the fact that they chose to omit the chorus during that final part through the track, the final 30 minutes, tells me that they weren't necessarily aiming to put a lot of focus on that chorus, which I find really interesting that it ended up being so catchy for someone. So we spoke about the chorus. Let's talk about the verse a little bit. Beautiful. Very minimal work going on here. The drums have some really tasty closed hi-hat stuff, which allows it to take up very little space while still having some of that bright shimmeriness that the cymbals bring to the table. It does have some drive with some of the snare and bass ideas, but again, sparingly used. Right here, we're going for maximum space, because what we have a lot of is reverb and notes coming from the guitars, and I love how all of this works. The two guitars are playing off of each other. They're sort of playing their own ideas. I don't think that they ever really lined up at any point, but they also fill in each other's spaces, where one might hold out a note just a hair bit longer than the rest of their idea because especially the right guitar is doing a lot of movement, but it doesn't do strictly eighth notes or something like that. It plays some eighth notes, some quarter notes, it changes up pacing. And so some notes are held out a little longer than others, and that's where the other guitar comes in and sort of fills those spaces in. And so it sounds a bit like a hocket at times, with both of the guitars filling in to create one full melody that exists between the two of them. Very great writing. I love the vocals, how it acts as a counterpoint to all of this movement over here. Honestly, I think I paid more attention to the guitars because I couldn't tell you what the vocal melody was in the verse. Honestly, all I really remember is the guitar and the drum and the bass work. I do remember that the vocalist was holding out some notes, but again, I couldn't hum the melody for it. It just never really grabbed my attention the way that everything else did. And I suppose that's something else to bring up as well, is that even in the chorus, the vocals, I don't know if I'd call them the least interesting, but they're the least present. They're the thing that my ears want to gravitate towards the least. I think part of that is just the spaciousness of it. It's a lot of long held out notes. On any other instrument, I would call it foundational. It's harmonic. It gives us chords. We hold out long chords. That's usually the kind of stuff you do on the instruments that are outside of the spotlight. But because of the placement of the vocals, they have a little bit more presence in the mix, and because vocals are traditionally held above everything else as far as importance in similar music to this, at least me, I've been trained to put the vocals in the center in situations like this, even though my ears don't necessarily want to pay a lot of attention to them. I find that really interesting. And again, like I said, some of that is me, the way I've been conditioned to listen to music that sounds like this. I mean, I even came to metal the same way. I think some of my first comments about metal was how the vocals were pushed so far into the mix. I was so used to hearing them above that. Um, and so here they're sort of still placed up there, but they're just not given importance in the composition, which is a really interesting clash, where the production tells you one thing and the composition says another. But I do think ultimately it works. Even if my ears naturally moved towards the guitar, it all comes together because the guitars are moving quite a bit. So for the vocals to be more stagnant and more of a harmonic element, even if they aren't necessarily foundational, or I would call them a musical floor to the song, it is balanced in a way that works well and allows every instrument to shine. Um, the only thing that I think really stands out to me that I didn't quite enjoy is the bridge. I don't even really know how to talk about it. It was purely textural in a way, sort of like how our verse is really going to build an atmosphere, but this did it with distorted guitars and a riff, a very rhythmic riff. It never quite connected with me. It seemed to want to merge the atmosphere of the verse with the driving, heavier writing of the chorus and create something that was atmospherically present while also being driven and having this forward momentum. And I don't know, it never quite clicked with me. I felt like there was still a need for a melody there. I was really expecting a guitar solo to pop up somewhere, and then it just never did. And then we went back into the Forsaker post-chorus section, and I don't know, it just felt a bit empty. I think maybe if I'm just expecting it, I'm like, okay, this works really well, but not knowing what's coming next, the whole time I was expecting something to be put on top of this foundation, and they just never went that way. And I kind of feel the same way about the chorus. There's so much room as far as pitch is concerned at the top of the song that I was really expecting some higher, well, either a higher line entirely as counterpoint, because we've already explored a little bit of counterpoint in the verse, but even just octave based harmony, or a fifth up, maybe even, just to provide some higher notes on top of the main vocal line to fill in this space. It just felt really empty to me. And they never ended up doing that at all. We got one note, I think, that was in the range I was expecting at the end of the second chorus, but it was muffled and sort of pulled down into the mix, that it was more of a textural harmony than something that I would say is designed to really take the spotlight alongside the vocals. So, I don't know. It's like I said, it's an interesting decision. It's not what I would have done, but that's always what makes music cool. Listening to other people and what they would do in situations. So, yeah. Overall, I think this is a solid track. Interestingly, I don't know about 2009, but I could see this on the radio today. It seems to fit in with some of the music that's going on, and it being more atmospheric, I think fits in with the idea that a lot of music today is very vibe based. Whereas I think it was less so back in the 2000s, which still felt very riffy to me. That's not to say we don't have riff-based rock today, or hard rock, I think, is what we would call the chorus there. But that atmosphere just seems to be becoming more prevalent in how music is created and what the popular sound in mainstream rock is right now. So, actually, look no further than Sleep Token if we're talking about vibe-based rock acts. So something like this, I can definitely see why it wouldn't have been as popular or maybe as radio compatible at the end of the 2000s. But I mean, if this released today, 100% this would be on the radio. And I think that's pretty cool. Um, I'm curious if it actually would be, you know. If Katatonia came up and said, actually, this is a brand new song, they try to convince radio stations it's brand new, would they play it? Because Katatonia is just a band that I never heard of until doing the channel, even though I think some of their stuff would have been very radio friendly. And especially nowadays. Anyways, I'm rambling about stuff that's not really about the song anymore, so let me hit some lyrics and wrap this video up. The first thing I want to note is that based at least on Genius, what I had was verse, chorus, post-chorus. Genius has listed as verse, pre-chorus, chorus, with the repetition of the word Forsaker being the chorus itself. I'm kind of curious how much of this was informed by me looking for the catchy chorus, and the repetition of that word is not catchy to me, so I assumed it was outside of the chorus. And I'm curious, the person who suggested it, what they felt about the structure and where they feel the chorus is or should be. Regardless, there's not a lot of lyrics here, which makes sense because a lot of the lyrics are long, held out notes, so we don't get through a lot of words really quickly. This is like the opposite of rap. We end up with the two pre-choruses and the chorus, which are the same. We have 4 short lines there, and then the word Forsaker, and then 2 verses are 4 short lines each. There's a whole 13 lines here, and each of those lines is 4 words long. So, again, not a lot of text. I don't really know what's going on here, though. The pre-chorus says, "The dark will rise, abandon your freedom, give up the right to find your true self, forsake your own reasons." And then the chorus says, "Forsaker." There definitely seems to be some sort of power here that is trying to remove power from someone else, or maybe a lot of someone else's, calling this a type of darkness that's going to remove the freedom from everyone else. But the 2 verses don't expand on this a lot. Like I said, in written words, probably about 1 sentence each. Verse 1 says, "Rage from a distance, the name unfamiliar, spikes reach the heart, time set for rewind." And verse 2 says, "Hand of a leader, bleached by snowfall, opposition is drugged, the great end is sweeping in." This does lean into the idea that there is some power, some person coming in and taking away people's freedoms, right? The idea that the opposition is drugged. Anybody who is trying to come against me is going to be removed from the equation. And they call it the great end, which would probably be a metaphor for this removal of freedoms of anybody who this leader sees over. But I don't really understand the verse 1 unless it's supposed to be speaking to how the leader rises. They have a rage, spikes in their heart, and they become this person who decides to strip people. I don't know. Strip people of their freedoms. Let me finish that sentence. But it's so sparsely written that I think it can be read in a lot of different ways. It's really open for interpretation. So I'm going to leave it there. I think I have a general idea of what's going on, but I'm missing context. Whether that context comes from more of the album or liner notes or maybe just some of the metaphors I'm not quite clicking with, I don't know. If anybody has insight into this, please put it down in the comments. Those are my thoughts, though, on Katatonia's Forsaker. Alongside your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives, your interpretations. Also, just let me know if you have anything to add on to what I said, or maybe even just correct me on things that I might be incorrect on. Put all that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.